China has told Australia not to intervene as tensions rise over a writer accused of spying. Earlier, Canberra said one of its citizens was formally arrested on suspicion of espionage, a charge punishable by death in China. Chinese-born Yang Hung-jung was detained in January. Yang was a former diplomat turned blogger who was popular online. Now, for more on this, John Blaxland from ANU College of Asia and the Pacific joins us now to take a closer look at Australia's relationship with China. Firstly, political tensions between Canberra and Beijing have been mounting. How will the Yang case further complicate things?
Well, it's a very interesting question, Steve, because what we're seeing is a liberal Western democracy butting up against illiberal assertiveness, and that is driving the contestation at the moment. Dr. Yang has made a point about pointing out political interference in Australia, and that's very, very clearly irritated Chinese authorities enormously, and he's now facing charges of espionage. And of course, we know that espionage charges in China are much easier to level against somebody, because what we in Australia and other parts of the world would consider normal information, incidental collection of information, completely innocuous, Chinese authorities can quite easily slap a label of espionage on it and leave somebody like Dr. Yang incarcerated for 6 months without notification as to what he's being charged for, and even then subject to pretty well arbitrary processes. And it's really very disconcerting. So it's very interesting to see the Australian Foreign Minister Marise Payne speak so assertively about this. And the pushback from China is also interesting, because it's a bit of, there's a saying, everybody likes a good set of double standards. And it certainly does seem to be the case for China, because China seems quite happy to tell Australia how to do things when it comes to internal matters relating to security in Australia, particularly concerning Chinese migrants to Australia. And yet, for Australia to dare to broach the topic about Australian citizens operating inside China, it's not acceptable. So this is an ongoing concern. It's something not just about Australia, it's about really all of us.
Well, saying that, John, because Australia is also wary of Chinese influence in, as you mentioned, their domestic politics as well, has the foreign interference bill perhaps maybe managed to quell this a little?
Yeah, look, it was a very contentious bill when it was passed through Parliament last year, but it has taken the issue of foreign interference into a different dimension. It is not nearly as contested as it was before. There is a far greater and broader recognition that it really is a substantive concern, and that even the most well-disposed people towards China are now much more circumspect about how to respond, because it's demonstrably clear that China is and has been assertive in this space in a way that is rubbing up against our liberal principles. And so the legislation, while it was a little bit contested at the time, has really passed pretty well uncontested now. It's very much accepted, and the provisions of that legislation are now being put into practice and driving considerable cultural change within Australia.
Just one last quick question for you. China is Australia's largest trading partner at the end of the day. Do you see a new source of friction opening on this front?
Yeah, look, it's a very good question, Steve, because there's no question there is friction here. But I would just point out that, China doesn't buy from Australia because it likes Australia's liberal Western democracy. It does it because it's a good deal. And China is very, very good at arguing that we need to be very circumspect about challenging China. But here's a point, and here's, I think, the rub point here, and that is that we are, as liberal Western democracies, mindful that if you don't push back, then you can get rolled. And it is important for Australia to stand its ground, and this is why our Foreign Minister has done so, Marise Payne. And there is, I think, broad consensus on both sides of politics in Australia that that's an appropriate thing to do, respectfully but firmly stressing Australia's interests and at the same time looking for some collegiality amongst like-minded countries across Southeast Asia and beyond. Canada's had a similar experience with undue pressure on its citizens who've been detained, related to, Chinese concerns about Huawei being cut out of deals and about Chinese enterprise being blocked by other measures. So this is. Most pundits are now seeing this as a fairly arbitrary use of Chinese power in a way that is, in the long run, I think, not really in China's interests because it is undermining China's attractiveness to others.
All right, Mayor, thanks for your thoughts this evening. John Blaxland from the ANU College of Asia and the Pacific.